So this is what the end product looks like. There is audio. Quit my Dropbox. I need more audio volume here. Wake up. There we go. Sweet. Okay, so you can see that the screen's been replaced. And there's the hammer added into this. You can see some reflection on there, and then it goes away. Okay, so it's not too crazy steps, but new stuff. Let me go back to where we left off before. Last time we left off with just this. Oops, without the hammer in here. There we go. That's what we had last time. Okay, so the next parts of this is we can start bringing in the video and start putting things together, and that will help, help us to figure out what we need to do. I will have in Canvas by today the video for this, so obviously you can have that. I will also have the hammer stuff, and then I will also have the screen images. Hologram movies. So here is that movie. And then what I want to do first is I just want to obviously preview it, make sure it works. I've already done that. I already know that the video works. It's it's how we shot it. It's good. So I'm gonna make a new composition. If I look at these settings, 1280 by 720, and it's 2997. So I'm just gonna make it 960 by 540, 2997. And then the length is 18 seconds and 7 frames. So I'll just make the duration 18 seconds and 7 frames. And then I can just drop that down. Now, the other thing I could have done, just so you can see it, let me delete comp 2. If I drag this piece of footage to a new composition, just like everything else, it will automatically create it, but it makes it the same size that the original was. So I need to shrink it down to 960 by 540 so that it goes a little bit faster. So I change this to 960, 540, and then I have to hit S to scale, and then set this to 75, and that will scale it perfectly in there. The other thing that this does that's kind of weird is it sets the timestamp based on something that's in the video. So my start time code is actually like 8 days or 8 hours, minutes, yeah, 8 hours. So I want to also reset that to zeros so that this starts at 0, it doesn't start at 8 hours. I don't know why it does that with this, but it did. Sweet. Okay, so there's our piece of footage. So now what I need to do is I need to cut it because I don't need the beginning part of this where we're just setting up. So I want to get it basically right before she starts typing. So right there is where she starts actually typing, so I'm going to go right before it to right about there. Okay, so I'm going to cut the video, bring it back to the beginning, and then push the button. All right, and then right here at the end, that's where it goes away. So now I can kind of shrink my stuff and then trim my comp. Okay, so now I know exactly this is how long my piece of footage is. So when I bring in my hologram, I drop it there, and then I know how long it's going to last. It may help too, just to kind of put some markers in here as to what's happening. So if we go right there, she starts typing. So I'm going to use the asterisk on the numeric keypad, and then I can double click that and say typing. Okay, now it says typing, so I know that's when typing starts. Now the reason that's important is because I want to, as she's typing stuff, type stuff out on the screen, right? And so obviously those things need to line up, otherwise it looks stupid. Right there, she stops typing. So I'll put another marker, oops, right there. Stops. And it doesn't have to be anything long, just, as long as we know what it is. And then right there-ish, right around there. It's hard to see, but her finger does move down slightly. That's where she hits the mouse. Little things, but they work. They matter. Mouse. And then right here too. That's where her finger hits the hollow button. 1. And then later. There. Okay. So now we know exactly where things need to happen. These are all the stuff that we need to then add pieces to animate. So before we do the hologram, I'll do the screen first because a screen is typically like an easy thing to do. So I'm going to create a new solid. It doesn't matter what color I make it, as long as it's not the same color as a screen so that I can see it. I need contrast so that I can line things up. So I'm going to just make it this color. Hit OK. And then I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go to Distort, and I'm going to say Corner Pin. What we can do with Corner Pin is I can just take these corners and just line them up right with the corners of the screen. Now, this piece of footage is stationary. I had a tripod. The tripod stayed in one spot. It didn't move. If this was a moving video, we would actually be able to track each one of the corners of this and animate each one of these corners so that as the camera moved around the screen would appear to also like stay locked onto the screen. Okay, one of our assignments in the next few weeks will be a tracking assignment where we will do something similar to that. Okay, so you see what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of lining these up right with those corners. Okay, this one, there's like a lip on there, so I'm just putting on the inside of that lip. There, that should be good. Okay, I want to click off. I want to make sure it still looks good. I can tweak it later, but I just want to, get it close. All right, so now that I know that that piece of footage is locked into that spot, I'm going to right-click and pre-compose it. This is going to be my screen footage. And I want to leave all the attributes inside here. If I move them, then that distort, that corner pin will go with it. I don't want the corner pin to go with it. Okay? Very similar to our mapped footage where we had one comp that had our map and then another comp that did all the animation. Same thing. This one will have the corner pin locking that into place, and when I double click this, that will have this stuff inside here. Okay? So here's what I need to know from that. Let me rename this so that I don't get confused from my example and the one that I am doing. Demo footage. There we go. Okay. So I need to know when to start typing here. So at 26 seconds, that's when we start typing. And remember, if I'm at 26 seconds here and I go to this point, I'm still at 26 seconds. So it maintains that timestamp as I move along. I could even just grab this and copy it and then paste it just so I would have something that I could reference as far as this is when typing starts and stops in the mouse and the hollow button. So for the screen, under my artwork folder, I have a picture. Oops, put this on top. There we go. I have a picture of my actual like 3D file that I'm going to use. It's not the same proportions. You can see it gets cut off there and cut off on the other side. Not a huge deal either way. If I really wanted this to fit perfectly, I could, just scale it, and it would be fine. It's not too much of a difference that it's going to be noticeable from that far away. Okay. Now this part here doesn't actually come in until she clicks the mouse. So this part at the beginning, this is her typing, load Thorhammer, whatever it is. And then when she clicks the mouse, this thing pops in. Okay. So the typing part, I'm just going to go to my type tool. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to type in loading hologram project. I chose Papyrus, of course. Why not Comic Sans? We know why Papyrus, right? Anyone who teaches type hates Comic Sans. We just use Papyrus because of Ryan Gosling. Alright, so that looks like a sufficient font for what we're doing. Loading hologram project. I will use that font. I will move this into the middle like so. Perfect. Cool. So if you remember from our typing exercises where we did all those quotes, we can animate this thing coming on. So I'm going to use my animator. I'm going to go here. I'm just going to say opacity. I'm going to take my opacity down to 0 for the, oops, not that. Oops, opacity down to 0, there we go. And then I can animate this coming onto the screen just like that. Okay, sweet. Now I want this to start at this point. When she starts typing, that's when it starts. Now she's typing a lot, and there's only a little bit of stuff on the screen, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to notice. So we say set a start keyframe. We'll go to the end of her typing. We'll put that at 100. There we go. So now we get that. Percentage characters mode. Yeah, that's good. I'll take that off. Yeah. If I take this smoothness off, it doesn't smooth out. Like some of these will be like half blending in there. You can see the O is kind of partially transparent. By taking that off, it either is or it isn't. So it's 0 to 100, so we get more of a typing look compared to the other stuff. Cool. All right. Now I want to put some dots underneath it, so I'm going to get my typing tool again, and then just put a bunch of dots. And this will be the loading bar for that. You could create a different loading bar if you want. That's the one I'm going to use. And I will do the exact same animator. So I'm just going to copy this one. I'm going to go to that one and paste it. And then just move my keyframes so that they're lined up with when things are going to happen. Oops. I also have to make sure that my animator, oops, I have to add that opacity and change it to 0. So now it says loading. That's what she's typing in. And then the dots go across the screen. And then after the dots get to the other side of the screen, that's when a little bar is going to pop up that says, you know, execute or something. Okay. So I just went into here, made a rounded rectangle. You can design this however you want. I'm just keeping it simple for the demo. And we don't need this red here. We don't need that. We can just simply use a, I need to have something there. We can simply use a black solid now. All right, that looks good. I think I may probably move this up a bit. And take these two and just kind of nudge them there. All right. So there's the typing, there's the dots. When the dots get to the end, that's when these two guys pop in. So they'll move down here. And when she clicks the mouse, she's going to drag the mouse over to it. So I need a little mouse on here, a little arrow. So I can use the pen tool and just draw something very simple. Remember, it's going to be super tiny on the screen, so you don't have to spend hours making it perfect, but you should at least make an effort to make it somewhat symmetrical. There we go. And then I'm going to just move my anchor point here. I'm going to scale this down. I will rotate it a little bit, like that. And then I will give it a color. That did not give it a color because I picked the wrong spot. There we go. Sweet. Okay. So execute pops up on the screen. I need to know when she starts moving the mouse. So let me just jump back to this. So right there, she starts moving the mouse. So that's when the mouse is going to pop up on the screen. And then I'm going to set a position keyframe, scoot it over to here, and have the mouse be right there. That's like way too much movement. Let's bring that in a bit more. There we go. It looks a little bit more natural. Okay, I could add a click and whatever else, but I think it's good enough. Okay, so I need to hide everything else that's inside this project except for the mid image, this background image here. So if I just throw this on top, it'll obviously hide everything else, and then I can grab all the layers underneath and just cut them so that they stop there. So this is what that piece of footage will look like now. So say loading hologram project, bunch of dots, execute, and we're there. So now when I go back to that demo footage, I can check it out and make sure that it looks like it's actually happening. Cool. So that works. Now there is an issue. If you look at the color of this completely black, no screen is completely black. There's going to be some sort of highlight or reflection or something on there. It's super simple to change it. I just go to that piece of footage, I switch my modes, and I just set this to add. And what it does is it takes that reflection that's underneath it and it just adds my image right on top of it. So now when I hit play, it looks like it's actually on the screen. Versus if you look at the before, it's like super crisp. If you look here, it looks like there's actually like a little bit of a highlight going across that. If this was something more for Hollywood, they may actually go through and draw in every single highlight for every single screen. And that way they have more control over each part of that. But for this, I mean, that's awesome. We could also, if this was something where, let's say we shot our own footage and this piece of footage was too crisp for what this is, we could always go into the blur, and we could do just a Gaussian blur on this and just kind of soften some of those edges if it didn't match up. It actually matches up pretty good with where it's at. And then also you could go under blur and sharpen, and you can go to unsharp mask, and it's a stupid name, but it actually sharpens things. So if you crank this down, you see it's kind of fuzzy. As I crank it up, it actually makes the pixels a little bit crisper so that it's a little bit more visible there. Here it is without it. There it is with it. You can see how it just makes it pop just a little bit more, right? So I'm actually going to leave the unsharp mask on because I do want people to be able to see it. Here it's a little bit too much, so let me just take the threshold up a little bit more. There we go. Yep, that works. Okay. And you'll see we get this nice little reflection in here from, when we originally did the footage. Now, had I had the screen on, if the screen had a picture on it, this wouldn't work because the screen underneath obviously would be a different color. My adding it would have changed that color completely. So having it black, it works out perfectly. Okay. So that's easy-ish part. I can still tweak it. I can still add stuff to it, but I think for the most part, that works. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to add the Thor hammer in here. And what I want to do is I'm going to import that piece of footage. So my Thor hammer, I have it in a different folder, but you'll have it inside there. Images. All right, so what I did was, just so you can see this, that one. I grab any one of the images in that sequence. It's going to be basically when it renders stuff out of 3D, it's a bunch of individual frames. Every single frame is a file. After Effects reads all of these as one movie and then brings it in. So I grab any one of the files and then it will bring it in. So what I did was, this is the actual Thor hammer that I rendered out. I rendered it from several different angles. Depending on which perspective we were hitting, if my camera was up high, it would look weird to have a straight-on Thor hammer shot, right? That doesn't make sense. So I rendered it from different angles so that we would have that option if we decided that one angle didn't work. So this one is the far above. This one is far below. I didn't think we'd ever hit that angle, but just in case, why not? This one is slightly below. Yes. And then this one is slightly above. Slightly above is the one we're actually going to use. That's the one we're going to use. And then I also have one that is a head-on shot. Slightly head-on. There we go. Okay. So just another angle that I could use that. Now, just for people who are in 3D or have used 3D, I actually set up a camera for each one of these. So I have a camera that's here, 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 there, and there. And then the camera spins around the object for each one of those, or my object spun, either one. It works either way. So if I had any other products that I was doing this for, like imagine that we had the interface here that we're using. Imagine that we had more stuff involved in this, where the actress is typing stuff. She clicks on something, it loads a Thor hammer, and she's like, nope, that's not it. She clicks something else, it pops something else into that screen. I can basically put any product I want right in the center, render it out, and I could have a whole catalog of those things. If you remember Hunger Games, at the very end of the first one, where they were in the arena, and the girl's like, we're going to throw some, I forget what they called them, but the beasts.
Yeah, the dog things.
The dog things, right. She just like, she grabbed from her file and held it in her hand, and it was spinning around. This is the same thing. And then she just threw it in there, and then it magically shows up somehow. Same thing, right? So it's just a matter of getting these things rendered out. You could add literally anything there. Okay? So we're going to use the slightly above one. So I'm going to go and find my slightly above one, which is under slightly above right there. It's an EXR, which is a special kind of file format. So I hit Open EXR Sequence. Make sure that's clicked. Make sure I click on any one of these. Do not click on all of them. Just click one. And then say Import. And that will bring in the sequence. If I double click it and hit play, I should see this thing spinning around. If I don't see it spinning around, I've done something wrong. I will fix it. Okay? So I need to do some tweaking to this first because I want it to look a little bit more CG. So I'm going to drag this onto a new composition because I want to tweak this a bit. You'll notice that the composition is kind of like a weird size. I don't need to have those ends because the ends don't do anything for me. I could have black on the sides of it, but it's nothing. As long as my product is in the center of this, that's all I care about. And this is one of the cool things about an EXR. I can store data inside of an EXR that I could then pull out later on. So one of the things I stored inside this EXR is a wireframe because I want to have a wireframe on here so that it looks like it's 3D. So if I go to Effect, I go to 3D Channel, and I go to Extractor, you'll notice from the name, it's Extractor, and the EX and R are capitalized because it's for EXR files. If I click on this, then I can pick any one of these things. So I want to pull out the wire, so I'm going to hit Wire and hit OK. So now I have the wireframe of that file. Now that's something I set up in my 3D program to render out the wireframe. Then I'm going to take this layer and duplicate it. I'm going to click on this again. And then I'm going to choose ambient occlusion, which is that top one. And then I'm going to duplicate it again. And then I'm just going to delete the extractor. Okay, so I should have 3 in here. One of them is the color, nice pretty one. One of them is the ambient occlusion, which is this black and white one. And then one of them is the wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these so I don't get confused. This is called the beauty. That's what it's called. That's what it's called. This one's ambient occlusion. You can just say AO. And then this one is wire. You can just say wire. So beauty will go on the very bottom. Ambient occlusion can be on the top. And then the wire will be right there. So the way that these work is if you look at this here, this doesn't look like there's a whole lot of contrast or a whole lot of like detail right where that hits. If I go to the ambient occlusion, you'll see that this is a black and white image. Right there, it's pretty dark. So if I take this and multiply this, what that does is it just makes those edges pop a little bit more. And so this thing feels a little bit more solid than it does here. It's kind of like an unsharp mask, but it's doing it in a very specific way just to areas that need it. Okay. It's also called like a cavity map in some spots. Now the wire, when I turn that on, that's also a black and white image. So I'm going to change this to multiply as well. And you'll see what we get here is this is now a black wire on top of our stuff. And then the ambient occlusion is on top, the wire's there, and then the beauty is there. Okay. Now just to give this again, just more stuff we can add on top of this. This is already looking pretty sweet, but there's always something more we can do to make it look a little bit more digital or fancy or whatever, especially if this is a hologram. The technology does have, like, it's not a perfect image floating in space. It is kind of like a randomish kind of thing. So I'm going to make a new solid like so. That's good. I'm going to go to noise, and I'm going to create a turbulent noise. And this is what we used when I made the original hologram. We had this noise feature. So I'm going to take my wire, and I'm going to do a track matte and do a luma matte to the black solid. And what that does is if I can't wait, I guess I can turn this off here. Nope. And make this white, and then you can see what it'll do. There we go. So I'll turn this off there. So what it's going to do is kind of randomize where the wireframe is. Right now it's pretty much gray, so we're not really seeing a whole lot. But once I go to that turbulent noise and I start taking my contrast up, what we should see is that there's going to be spots where the wireframe doesn't exist, and then there will be spots where the wireframe does exist. So if we then take that and animate it, we should get this kind of neat movement of the wireframe kind of like around the object. Okay, like that. That looks cool. All right. So then I'm just going to animate this turbulent noise. Now, this is something if you looked at the original one again, you probably wouldn't even notice it because it's just not crazy visible. But if I didn't have it there, then I would be missing something. All right. So I could go ahead and animate this. I can click on this, set a keyframe, click on this, and set another keyframe. It's much easier now that we're a little bit more advanced just to do an alt click and then type in that expression time times 30, and then basically this will just automatically start moving around. Okay, or if I want to move faster, I'll go time times 80 or 90. There we go. Okay, and so it's a subtle thing, but it is there, and it does add something to it. Again, if you looked at what they do in a for a final product of something that they use for a commercial or a movie or whatever, it's all of these layers that add up to making this final thing look awesome. Also, this thing spins way too quick, so I need to slow that down. That's like really, really quick. I'm going to go to my composition settings. I'm going to make this 3 times as long, or 4 times as long, so I'll go 8 seconds. I'm going to enable time remapping on these 3. So I right click on all 3 of those and go to time remapping. Oops. And I'm just going to take each one of these and just scoot it down to the end and then drag this to the end. And I'll pull that also to the end. There we go. So now what it's going to do is, because I've stretched it out 4 times its length, it's going to basically duplicate each frame 4 times. So that way it'll go slower. Now that's a pretty good speed that it's going. If it was going any faster, it might be an issue. Now this is what we've used before. I've shown time remapping before, where we can take something and stretch out the length of it. I'm going to undo that for a second. There we go. right there. I could also click on this little button here on the bottom. This allows us to simply just stretch it. If I know that I just want to stretch something out and just make it longer, I can just say make this 250% longer. And now it's 250% longer. Okay, so that's a little bit easier way to do that. Cool, so now I have my Thor hammer, that's all set up. Here's my screen footage, right? There's that, and then here's the demo. So what I need to do now is I want to bring my Thor hammer into my hologram, and then bring my hologram into here. Okay, it doesn't matter which order I do that in. I'll bring the hologram in first. I'm going to go to this hologram and just delete the Thor hammer that I have from there so I don't have the extra one. Demo footage. And let me start throwing my compositions where they need to go. And my movies where they need to go. And then my Thor hammer I'm throwing in sequences. Alright, so here is my hologram one. So this is just this piece of footage. Okay, so I'm going to go to my screen footage, demo footage, drop the hologram in here, and what I need to do is it's going to start right away. There it is, right in the middle of the screen, right as she's typing. Okay, so where should this start? At holo button 1, right? That's when you're hitting the first button, click it, and then it goes. So now when we hit play, you'll do your typing, and then you hit the button, and then it goes there. Okay, so we can take this and just simply position it right here. Oops, I should rewind it so we can see the whole thing, make sure it looks good. And you'll see that it does look pretty decent, right? It looks like it's, it's kind of there. It's not perfectly there, but it's kind of there. It does look like it's at a weird angle, though. If we look at the angle of that, it's facing us at the camera. It's not facing Emily at her desk. So what we want to do is we want to rotate this so that it turns around. So I'm going to go to, there's a few different things I can do. One of them, I could make this a 3D layer. I could go to rotate, and then I could rotate this like that. And then that will give us a little bit closer. It doesn't get us perfectly, but it gets us a little bit closer. Now the reason it doesn't is because obviously as we go like this, we're kind of losing that shape, and it's looking a little bit flatter. Also, if you looked at that line is going this way and the desk is going that way. So what we need to do is also rotate it like that. Now, just so you are aware, I went through that just to play around with it. And here, again, it looks okay, but now the hologram light is shining like off to the corner. It's not shining straight up and down the way it should. All right, so what I need to do is, and I'm not going to use 3D. I'm going to use that distort, and I'm going to use corner pin again. Okay, and corner pin automatically goes out to the edges of this. So this is going to be a little bit odd when you're lining it up. You can see how far away this is. But what I'm doing is just trying to squeeze that so that it fits inside of where I want the angle of this, where I want the position to be. There we go. So that looks pretty good right there. I can still move this over a little bit. So that looks like it's at a pretty good angle. Her eye looks like it's kind of facing in here, so that's good. Sweet. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to take that and I want to also create a reflection on the desk. If you look, the desk has reflections from the wall. It has reflections from her arm. But it doesn't have anything from here, especially how bright this is. There should be something right there. So if I duplicate the hologram layer and I grab the corner pin for this and just lay it down, you'll see how I can line this up to get that right where I need it. Okay. And again, it's going to be weird because it's definitely not like in the exact corners we would like it to be. But all we're trying to do here is just line up the edges and line up the angle that we want. So right about there looks pretty good. Okay, so right there, that looks like it's a pretty good reflection as to it hitting the desk and then coming out. It would probably be a little bit more towards us, just because how reflections work. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now to get this to not be weird, right now it's kind of floating off of the desk, which doesn't make sense. And also when she puts her hand in here, it doesn't really do it in this one. The first one I did, it did it a bit more. Let's see if it does it here. Yeah, so right there, you can see that her hand is inside the reflection. This should be a little bit softer or dimmer right there, so we'll take care of that too. Okay. So I'm going to go to the hologram, and I'm going to rename this Holo Reflection Main Hologram. Okay, I'm going to take my hologram reflection and I'm going to change this. Oops, let me put it back where it was. I'm going to put this on as an add so that it will add to the scene. It'll add to the images or to the pixels, and it won't overwrite it. Okay, now we'll get what it's kind of a neat little visual we'll get. When this is on normal, it might be a little bit more obvious there. Okay, you can see the glowing right here is like amplified when I turn it to add. It just pops it just a little bit more. Okay, cool. All right, so we need to cut this off so it doesn't do this. So I'm going to right click on the reflection. I'm going to pre-compose it, and I'm going to say move all of them in there and say Holo Reflection Pre-Comp. And then I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm just going to outline the area where I want that to no longer exist. So right here, right there, I don't want that reflection to exist anymore. Okay, so that if I hit M, that opens up the mask, or it should open the mask. There we go. And I just say subtract, and now it subtracts that from the hologram reflection, so then we don't have it there. It's not existing. I could also, or should also, take the feather for this up a little bit. Now again, remember, if this is a moving camera, everything I'm doing here would have to be done on that moving camera basis. If it is a moving camera too, I could actually create this whole hologram effect in 3D, and that way a lot of this would actually be done in 3D. Okay, so that's good there. It goes right to the edge, which is perfect. And then when she puts her hand back into there. Okay, so that looks kind of weird with her hand. I mean, there should be some kind of reflection, but not as much as there is. I'm going to go in with my pen tool, and this is called rotoscoping. This is tedious, and there's people who get paid like $10, $12 an hour for 70 hours a week just to do this for movies. And what I'm doing is I'm outlining each part of her. So I don't want to outline the entire hand, because as the hand moves, that entire mask has to move. What I want to do is outline each finger and focus on just one finger at a time, basically. So I put that on there. I'm going to say subtract. I'm going to go to the next finger. And when they used to do movies, like cartoon movies, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they would videotape a lot of stuff, and then they would draw right on top of the video. Oops. Come on. Let's go this way now. Move that there. Okay, now each one of these I have to make sure that I put a subtract, and I put a subtract, and then this here. Now this area isn't too bad. I'll get the pinky also. This area is not too bad. I just want to highlight it a bit. If she was wearing a different colored outfit, like a white shirt or something, this might be a little bit more obvious of what's happening. And we'd have to do more, but this is pretty good the way that is. Go, and then subtract again. Okay. So now you'll see that at that frame, the reflection is not on her hand. Okay. So I need to then go through. It's a little bit on her hand. That's why we would use a feather. Oops. And if I hit F, that opens up feather, and then I can feather that slightly. That's too much. Okay. Because there should be something there, some way that they're blending together. Now what I have to do for each one of these, I'm going to hit M again, is set a keyframe, use the page down and page up buttons to advance my frames, and then move her hand further, or move those masks up. Now don't go through the next frame and do it, and then the next frame and do it, then the next frame and do it. Go up like 5 or 10 frames, and then put your keyframe in. Because her hand is not like going crazy, it's literally just moving in and then hitting the button. So if you go up 10 frames, After Effects will do a lot of the work for you. So like right there, I think I'm going to go and then move her hand there. So I click and drag this whole thing. You'll see how it grabs everything. Oops. And then the same thing there. The more work you put into this, typically, the better it's going to turn out. Not always, but typically. Remember how much you like the pen tool from Illustrator class? Alright, so now I'm going to hit the page up, and I'm just going to watch the masks go backwards. Okay, and if they get too far, like right here, they're a little bit too far away, I'll just grab these and push them up. Okay, luckily there's not that many frames. Maybe like 10 frames that we actually have to be concerned about. If there's a little bit of overlap like this, that's fine. It's not going to be a huge deal. The whole thing is we want to have something there where it doesn't look out of place. Okay, right there the masks are obviously off. I need to go in, move all my masks around. If you double click one of these, it will allow you to move it, and then you can rotate it. So as long as she's keeping her finger straight, it makes our job a lot easier. Come on. And they can overlap, so don't worry about, if the masks do overlap, that's no big deal. And then once the button gets hit, the hologram goes away, and then we don't even need the masks anymore. Okay, and I'll go back and I can still tweak that and modify it and whatever else. And I think those little dots at the end look weird too, so I would also animate this mask here, that once the button gets clicked, right there, I'm going to set a mask path here, scoot this up a bit, and then pull this into that. It looks weird having those dots there. I could have also cut that layer off, Oops. I also have to fix our hand right there at the beginning. There we go. All right. So again, I'll go back. I'll tweak it, move it around, whatever. Sweet. Okay. So now we just need to add the Thor hammer into the mix. And then this is pretty much done. Weird handprint. All right, let's go to the hologram. I'm going to go to my project. I'm going to find my, I have my Thor hammer slightly above comp. I'm going to go to that. Thor hammer slightly above, and I'm going to drop it in. Now, the way that I drop this in is I want it to be, there's a hologram light, there's the Thor hammer, then a hologram light behind it. So I want to like sandwich it. So I duplicated some stuff inside here just so I would have my hologram in the front and the back. So there's my hologram there. And here is, let me turn off this thing for a second. There's that. There's my shine. There's my lines in the front. And then these are my lines in the back. There we go. Cool. So now I'll take the Thor hammer. I will scale the Thor hammer down so that it fits inside here. And you'll have to play with it. You'll have to literally just go, not there, here. You'll have to go back and forth to tweak stuff. Now, in here, when the hologram comes up, you'll see that the Thor hammer actually might look kind of squished because of that corner pin that we used. Not a big deal. I may have to go to that hologram corner pin and just stretch that out some more. As long as we don't tweak the base of that too much, then we don't need to really adjust the other one. It's probably just going to be moving this slightly like that. There we go. And then just repositioning that. Now it doesn't look as squished. Good. Okay. So now I'll go back to the hologram. There it is. And then I need to create a way for the hammer to also come up. Okay, because right now the light comes up. I want the hammer to look like it's kind of like emitting or like growing. In the one that I showed, I actually did the hammer and the wireframe separately. In this one, I'm just going to do them together. If you want to do them separately, all of those deformations will happen on each one of these layers here. If you want to do them all together, they'll happen right here on this Thor hammer slightly above. So then I'll go to my distort, and I used, let me get the actual ones I used, because I played around with a couple different things because I was like, this one might look cool, that one might look cool. That. Fix controls. So I did a ripple and a flow motion, and if you look at what that looks like, I'm going to turn off some of this other stuff that I have here. If you watch it kind of grow, it does like this like weird blobby growing thing. So this top one, that's the ambient occlusion, that's growing, and then the hammer grows right behind it. So you see how you get that like weird, like it's coming out of where the hologram is. All right. So how I did that is I clicked on this and I went to distort, and one of them was flow motion. And the way that this works is you have 2 points. So I can move these, and I believe I moved both of these down to the bottom here. And then when I went to the amount, you'll see how it just kind of like warps down into that. Now there's 2 of them. There's the amount 1 and amount 2. You have to use both. Otherwise, you get that weird edge thing that's happening. I think I have to also turn that off. There you go. All right. So you get this cool, like it's growing out of it. So I'm going to set both of those to 0. I'm going to go to my Thor hammer. I'm going to say amount and amount. There we go. And then I'll just go back, and basically the same time that this is coming up is when I want to animate that. So right here, I'm going to put these at some crazy values so that it looks like it's like blobbing down into nothing. And then I can also animate its position so that it moves down. If you look at it, it's coming from the center, which, you know, looks kind of weird. So I'm going to go to the position for it and animate its position. So I'll say position should be right there. And then at the beginning of this, the position will probably be like down here. So now it looks like it's coming out of that hologram. Okay. And then the other one that I used was distort. You could play around with these and do whatever you want. It's just a matter of, what's going to look cool. Magnify mesh warp. Ripple. Okay, so I added ripple to this because I wanted it to have these kind of like wavy distortions to it on top of it. Okay, so again, something that I just kind of pulled at the beginning of this. I set a bunch of ripples. I went to the end of it, set it was 0. And so what we get is we just get a little bit more ripples as it's going down into that. Okay. And then that's pretty much all I did for that. We could play with the opacity of this just so that it is a little bit more transparent, so it's not fully opaque when it comes in. We could also, or need to also, take these keyframes, copy them, and paste them at the end, and reverse them just like we did the hologram. That way when it comes up, it does this. When it goes down, it does the same thing but backwards. And then we also have to time this out so that right here, when this comes up, it comes up in an appropriate amount of time. So that means that we have to go into the other file or into the other comp, make sure this is timed out correctly, come back into here and make sure it's timed out correctly to go away. So if this is where she clicks the button off, I would go back into the hologram and I would make sure that all of my keyframes at the end, I'll just do it to this real quick. All of my keyframes at the end are set up so that they go away right at the end of this. Okay, just like we did before, but now we actually have the piece of footage that we're timing it to. Okay, and then we have the hammer here. Everything's looking awesome. Sweet. Final touches we could do to this. We could make a adjustment layer on top. Drop this up here. We could go to our color correction. We could do a curves or exposure or any of these. We could do a photo filter. You guys have more plugins on yours. There's a thing called looks. I don't know if you guys have even looked at that. When it loads. It's called Magic Bullet Looks. And what this is like basically Instagram for After Effects. So if you were like, hey, I want this to be more cinematic or old school or whatever, you could do that. And it's pretty straightforward as to how it's able to do those kinds of things. So you can see all of these different filters. Yeah, they're just filters, and it's like 5 or 6 filters just stacked on top. You go to looks with your comp, you go through the list just like Instagram, and you pick which one you want, and then you hit OK. Without that, you can basically use like warming filters. Okay, so I added a little bit of warmth to this. You can see the lab looked kind of cold that day. Boom, now it's a little bit warmer. Color correction. We can go to hue and saturation. We can go to color balance. One thing I like to typically do is I like to throw on a black solid. That's not black. There we go. And then I like to put in a vignette, and I think we've talked about vignettes before, right? Yes. So if I go to my vignette, I go to my mask feathering. I invert it. This is a bad vignette right now, okay? Don't ever show anyone that. We have to hit the opacity, and we have to, the mode, and we have to set this to multiply, and then hit our opacity and start taking it down. Your vignette should be subtle. It should not be like crazy. It should not be something that's like super obvious. I have to push it. Every software is different. In Nuke, I basically make a very small shape, and then I feather it out all the way to the edges, and it looks perfect. In After Effects, I have to do that. Yeah, I have to make a weird oval shape. And then I can play with my opacity here. Okay, I'd probably adjust things like the brightness on this. This is a little bit too bright. I'd probably knock that down. Hollow reflection, maybe put that at 50% or something, or 30%. That seems more appropriate. If it was metal, glass, or something, obviously that reflection is going to be more, but on the table it would be pretty light. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. The next step I would do is I would go find sound effects, add some sound effects to this. Again, all of these little details go into this project, and all those little details make it feel more complete, like an actual project. When you go out and you're doing your portfolios, you're going to have, let's say, a Behance page or a Vimeo page or whatever, and you're going to have your demo reel. And then what people are going to want to see is, hey, I like that piece you did. I want to see what the actual full project looks like. And so if you don't have it looking good, it's going to be a piece of crap, and people aren't going to want to watch your stuff, and then they aren't going to want to hire you. So if you have all of these already set up so that they are perfect, then when you drop them in your demo reel, you can link to the actual end video and show them, here it is in my demo reel, and then here is the actual end piece of this. So adding sound effects is like always something you should do. Even in your first, second, third assignments, add not the page transitions, but the other stuff, you should add sound effects. Here's a couple that I found. Why aren't you playing out of here? That's weird. Yeah, it's playing there. Oops. Alright. Let me go to my folder and then open it from there. Hologram audio. That's turned out. Right? So there's like a little electricity thing, and you may not know, like, I want a whoosh. A whoosh may be 15 different things. You have to make sure you find the whoosh that you're looking for. So that was one that I liked. I like that too. That was kind of like a cool little sound. Oh my god. I need like an actual audio player for this. I don't know what that's opening. Groove music. There we go. So that's kind of cool how that's set up. I would also find keyboard typing stuff. Again, try to look for something that's going to match what's happening. Don't spend too long on a sound effect that you could easily create. These computers don't have microphones installed, but I have a microphone. So if you needed to capture typing, grab the microphone, record typing, done. You don't have to spend 45 minutes looking for it, okay? What else did I have? I had Fireball. Oh, this is where I got the... There you go. That's where I got the whoosh sound, and then I modified it. Okay, so it started off with that, and then I went with this. Okay, just by...
Scary from the other room.
It is scary.
Sounds like something trying to get in that you do not want in.
No, I heard that electric noise, and I thought, oh no, something's terribly wrong.
It's a lot of feedback.
I think the electric noise would be too much for the hologram.
It could be, but I could take the volume down on it and just, again, make it part of the thing as opposed to I'm showing off the electricity. Okay? All right. So once that's done, then I would go and I would make this into an actual movie. That is still too opaque up there. It's a bit better. My screen and that one is two different things. It's good enough. Okay. So that would be the end of the hologram one. Again, you can customize this as much as you want. The biggest thing here I'm looking for is that we have a piece of footage and we have a hologram there, however you want to make your hologram. This is one way. Meg was showing me another way she's going to play with in cinema. There's other ways you could do this.